Throughout human history, two powerful forces have shaped our understanding of reality: science and spirituality. Science offers us a methodical approach to understanding reality through observation, measurement, and experimentation. Spirituality, on the other hand, explores our experience through faith, intuition, and the search for transcendent meaning. Despite both seeking truth about our existence, these worldviews often appear to be in conflict. This tension creates friction around fundamental questions like the origin of the universe, the nature of consciousness, and the source of moral values. This tension between scientific and spiritual understandings has existed throughout human history. From ancient Greek debates between philosophy and mythology, through the Copernican revolution challenging church doctrine, to Darwin's theory of evolution confronting biblical creation. Today, this tension continues to shape modern discourse about knowledge, truth, and meaning. We see it in debates about quantum physics and consciousness, neuroscience and meditation, and the scientific study of spiritual practices. These conversations form the backdrop for modern discussions about what we know and how we know it. Despite their apparent conflicts, both science and spirituality ultimately seek truth about our existence. They approach this quest from different angles, using different methods, yet share a fundamental desire to understand the nature of reality. As we navigate the tensions between these worldviews, we can recognize their complementary roles in our search for knowledge and meaning. In the ongoing dialogue between science and spirituality, philosophy emerges as a crucial mediator. According to Adelusi, philosophy serves as an impartial referee, using logic and critical analysis to evaluate claims from both domains. Philosophical inquiry provides essential tools to critically analyze assumptions, identify fallacies, clarify concepts, and examine ethical dimensions in both scientific and spiritual claims. Philosophy helps us understand the different types of questions that science and spirituality address. Science focuses on how things work, what they're made of, and how they can be measured. In contrast, spirituality explores questions of purpose, meaning, and how we should relate to existence. These are complementary approaches to understanding reality. Through philosophical frameworks, we can see that science and spirituality need not contradict each other. They can complement one another by addressing different aspects of human experience. When guided by philosophical principles, science and spirituality can form a more complete understanding of our world and ourselves. Philosophy thus provides the crucial framework for understanding how these different ways of knowing can harmoniously coexist.
The Galileo affair represents one of history's most famous conflicts between science and religious authority. Galileo Galilei was an Italian mathematician, physicist, and astronomer who lived from 1564 to 1642. He made significant improvements to the telescope and used it to make astronomical observations that supported the Copernican heliocentric model. Let's examine the key events in the conflict between Galileo and the Catholic Church. In 1610, Galileo published his observations of Jupiter's moons, providing evidence that not all celestial bodies orbit Earth. By 1616, the Church had become concerned with Galileo's promotion of heliocentrism, and Cardinal Bellarmine warned him against teaching Copernican theory. In 1632, Galileo published his Dialogue concerning the two chief world systems, presenting arguments for heliocentrism despite earlier warnings. This led to his trial by the Roman Inquisition in 1633, where he was found guilty of suspected heresy. Galileo spent the remainder of his life under house arrest until his death in 1642. At the heart of this conflict were two competing models of the cosmos. The geocentric model, supported by church doctrine, placed Earth at the center of the universe with the sun and planets orbiting around it. Galileo advocated for the heliocentric model, which correctly placed the sun at the center with Earth and other planets in orbit around it. This created a fundamental conflict between scientific evidence and religious authority. The Church's position was based on biblical interpretation that described a stationary Earth and moving sun. Aristotelian cosmology had been incorporated into church doctrine, and challenges to this established order were viewed as heretical. Galileo's position was supported by empirical evidence from his telescope observations, including the phases of Venus and the moons of Jupiter, which were inconsistent with the geocentric model. In 1633, Galileo was summoned before the Roman Inquisition for his advocacy of heliocentrism. The consequences for Galileo were severe. He was forced to recant his views under threat of torture. His book was banned, and he spent the remainder of his life under house arrest. The Galileo affair has become emblematic of the tension between scientific discovery and religious authority throughout history. It raised fundamental questions about the interpretation of Scripture, highlighted tensions between empirical evidence and established authority, and created a lasting narrative about the Church's opposition to scientific progress. Legend has it that after recanting, Galileo muttered, "And yet it moves," referring to Earth's motion around the sun, though this is likely apocryphal. The Galileo affair reminds us how conflicts between science and religion often involve complex questions of authority, interpretation, and the limits of different ways of knowing.
In 1925, a landmark legal case known as the Scopes trial became a pivotal moment in the tension between science and spirituality in America. The case took place in Dayton, Tennessee, where high school teacher John Scopes was accused of violating the Butler Act by teaching evolution in a public school. The prosecution represented the religious perspective, defending biblical literalism and the Genesis account of creation. The case was championed by William Jennings Bryan, a former presidential candidate and prominent Christian. The defense represented the scientific viewpoint, advocating for Darwin's theory of evolution and the right to teach scientific consensus. Clarence Darrow, a renowned attorney, led the defense of John Scopes. The trial gained national attention as the first legal proceeding broadcast on radio, earning the nickname Monkey Trial from the media. A pivotal moment came when Darrow called Bryan as a witness on biblical interpretation, challenging his literal understanding of Scripture. After an 8-day trial, Scopes was found guilty and fined $100. However, the conviction was later overturned on a technicality by the Tennessee Supreme Court, which prevented the case from reaching the U.S. Supreme Court. The Scopes trial had profound and lasting effects on American education and society. Despite the legal defeat, it fundamentally altered how evolution was taught in public schools for decades, with many textbook publishers self-censoring evolutionary content to avoid controversy. The trial also challenged the boundaries between religious freedom and public education, helping to define the separation of church and state in schools. It sparked the creation of religious academic institutions and continues to influence debates on religious liberty today. The issues debated in the Scopes trial continue to echo in modern controversies, such as the intelligent design movement and cases like Kitzmiller versus Dover in 2005. The trial established a template for how conflicts between scientific consensus and religious interpretation are addressed in American society. At its core, the Scopes trial represents not just a legal case, but a fundamental question about how societies balance scientific progress with religious tradition, a question that remains relevant today. This section explores different ways of knowing, how science and spirituality represent distinct epistemological approaches to understanding reality. Science and spirituality offer complementary pathways to knowledge, each with their own methods and domains of inquiry. The scientific approach relies on empirical evidence and observation. It develops testable hypotheses that can be verified or falsified through experimentation. Science focuses on material explanations and values objectivity and reproducibility. Science typically asks questions about how things work, when events occur, and what processes govern physical phenomena. The spiritual approach values subjective experience as a source of knowledge. It explores questions of meaning and purpose, and often acknowledges a transcendent reality beyond the material world. This approach employs intuitive and contemplative methods. Spirituality typically asks questions about why we exist, what purpose our lives serve, and what meaning can be found in our experiences. Science and spirituality employ different methodologies to gain knowledge. Science uses experimentation, statistical analysis, and peer review, while spirituality often relies on meditation, contemplation, and communal practices. Science and spirituality offer complementary ways of knowing that address different questions. Science excels at answering how and what questions, while spirituality addresses why questions and matters of meaning. Together, they can provide a more complete understanding of reality, as different questions naturally require different approaches to knowledge. Science, with its rigorous methods and evidence based approach, has revealed countless mysteries of our universe. Yet it also has inherent boundaries that define the scope of scientific inquiry. Science excels at answering how questions. It can explain how stars form, how cells divide, and how gravity influences objects. However, science faces limitations when addressing why questions about purpose and meaning. Questions like, why do we exist or why do we seek meaning, often transcend purely material explanations. Falsifiability, a concept introduced by philosopher Karl Popper, is a fundamental requirement for scientific inquiry. For a hypothesis to be considered scientific, it must be possible to design an experiment that could potentially disprove it. The scientific method requires that hypotheses can be tested and potentially falsified. If no possible observation could prove a claim wrong, then that claim cannot be investigated scientifically. The scientific method faces inherent limitations when dealing with non-material phenomena. Consciousness, subjective experiences, aesthetic appreciation, and moral values often resist purely materialistic explanations. Similarly, science struggles with non-repeatable phenomena. Historical events, unique evolutionary adaptations, and rare cosmic occurrences cannot be replicated in laboratory settings, making them difficult to study using standard scientific methods. Philosophy serves as a crucial mediator at the boundaries of scientific knowledge. It helps us navigate questions that lie between empirical investigation and spiritual inquiry, recognizing that different forms of knowledge can complement rather than contradict each other. By recognizing the limits of scientific knowledge, we gain a more complete understanding of both its extraordinary power and its appropriate boundaries. This creates space for complementary ways of understanding our complex reality. While spiritual knowledge offers profound insights into human existence, it also faces significant limitations that must be acknowledged. Religious traditions across the world make competing and often contradictory truth claims. Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, and Judaism each present different understandings of divinity, afterlife, and moral imperatives. Sacred texts present significant interpretational challenges. The same passages can be read literally, allegorically, or through specific cultural historical lenses, leading to vastly different understandings. Spiritual claims and experiences face verification challenges. They are inherently subjective, cannot be reproduced on demand, and often exist outside the realm of standard measurement. Adelusi suggests a balanced approach to spiritual knowledge. This involves applying critical thinking to spiritual claims while maintaining respect for their value. This approach acknowledges multiple interpretative perspectives and recognizes that spiritual truths are often contextualized to personal and cultural frameworks. By recognizing these limitations, we can approach spiritual knowledge with both intellectual honesty and reverence, deepening our understanding rather than diminishing it. Ethical dimensions of scientific progress extend beyond mere capability to questions of responsible application. Scientific capability often outpaces our ethical frameworks, creating an imbalance that requires careful consideration. There are several critical domains where technological advancement has outpaced ethical frameworks. Genetic engineering technologies like CRISPR allow precise manipulation of the genome, raising questions about human enhancement and designer babies. Artificial intelligence systems increasingly make autonomous decisions that affect human lives, with limited ethical oversight. Social media platforms and surveillance technologies have transformed society, raising concerns about privacy, addiction, and manipulation. Spiritual and religious traditions offer valuable perspectives that can guide ethical considerations in scientific advancement. Many spiritual traditions emphasize human dignity, recognizing the inherent worth of each person beyond their utility or productivity. The concept of common good suggests that technological advancements should benefit all people, not just privileged groups. Stewardship teaches that knowledge and resources are not merely to be exploited, but responsibly cared for across generations. Let's examine how spiritual perspectives might inform bioethical considerations in emerging medical technologies. In gene editing, scientific perspectives focus on eliminating disease, while spiritual perspectives often emphasize respect for natural limits and the sanctity of life. Regarding end-of-life care, science may prioritize extending lifespan, while spiritual traditions often emphasize dignity in mortality and a meaningful conclusion to life. When allocating limited medical resources, scientific frameworks might prioritize efficiency and measurable outcomes, while spiritual perspectives emphasize equity and compassion. By integrating scientific innovation with ethical frameworks informed by spiritual wisdom, we can ensure that technological progress serves human flourishing. The intersection of scientific progress and spiritual wisdom creates a space for robust ethical frameworks that can guide our technological future. As we navigate the complex terrain of scientific advancement, spiritual perspectives remind us that progress must always serve human dignity and the common good. The danger of scientism explores how an over-reliance on scientific explanations can limit our understanding of reality. Scientism is the philosophical view that science is the only valid way of understanding reality and acquiring knowledge. It's important to distinguish between science as a method of inquiry and scientism as an ideology. Science acknowledges its limitations, while scientism claims universal authority. Philosopher Adelusi critiques scientism as fundamentally reductionist, arguing that it dismisses non-measurable phenomena and creates false hierarchies of knowledge. Scientism tends to dismiss important non-scientific forms of knowledge, including aesthetic appreciation, moral reasoning, and spiritual wisdom. The potential harm of scientism includes narrowing the scope of human inquiry, devaluing the humanities and arts, dismissing personal experiences, and ultimately limiting human flourishing. A more balanced approach recognizes multiple ways of knowing that contribute to human flourishing and understanding. By acknowledging the limits of scientific knowledge and valuing other forms of wisdom, we can develop a more complete understanding of our complex reality. Religious fundamentalism represents a significant danger in the discourse between science and spirituality. Religious fundamentalism is characterized by strict adherence to literal interpretations of religious texts, often rejecting scientific evidence that contradicts these interpretations. Adelusi warns that dogmatic interpretations restrict intellectual growth and spiritual development. The rejection of scientific discoveries widens knowledge gaps and diminishes the credibility of religious institutions. When sacred texts become weapons rather than guides to wisdom, their transformative potential is lost. Rigid religious interpretations can cause considerable harm at both individual and societal levels. At the individual level, fundamentalism often leads to cognitive dissonance and psychological distress when personal observations conflict with religious teachings. At the societal level, fundamentalism can lead to opposition to scientific education and research, political conflicts over evidence-based policies, and erosion of trust in educational institutions. Interpretive flexibility within religious traditions is crucial for accommodating new knowledge while preserving core spiritual insights. Interpretive flexibility allows religious texts to remain relevant across time and creates space for scientific discovery within faith. This approach preserves core spiritual insights while adapting to new knowledge, creating a more sustainable relationship between science and religion. Throughout history, religious traditions have demonstrated the capacity for interpretive flexibility. Early Christianity adapted Greco-Roman philosophical concepts to articulate theological doctrines. In the Middle Ages, Islamic scholars preserved and expanded upon Greek science while integrating it with their faith traditions. During the Renaissance, some religious thinkers found ways to engage with new astronomical discoveries. In the modern era, many religious communities have found ways to embrace evolutionary theory and cosmology while maintaining their core beliefs. It's important to recognize that resistance to fundamentalism is not a rejection of faith, but rather an embrace of its deepest wisdom. Critical engagement with religious texts often strengthens rather than weakens traditions, allowing them to remain vibrant and relevant. This requires intellectual humility from both religious and scientific communities. When approached with openness and flexibility, core spiritual insights can coexist with and even enrich scientific understanding. The call for humility in religion parallels the need for humility in science. Adelusi emphasizes that religious leaders and believers must approach their faith with humility, recognizing the limitations of human understanding when interpreting divine concepts. Religious interpretations are inherently influenced by cultural and historical contexts. What may seem like absolute truth often reflects the understanding of a particular time and place. Spiritual wisdom includes acknowledging the mystery of ultimate reality. Many religious traditions recognize that divine truths transcend complete human comprehension. Religious humility creates vital space for dialogue with scientific perspectives. When religious adherents approach their traditions with openness, they can engage meaningfully with scientific insights. The essence of religious humility recognizes that both scientific and spiritual approaches seek truth through different but complementary lenses. By embracing humility, religious traditions can maintain their spiritual depth while remaining open to the insights offered by scientific inquiry. Navigating personal belief systems in our complex world requires intentional strategies and reflection. Many individuals experience internal tension between their scientific understanding and spiritual or religious convictions. To navigate this tension, several practical strategies can be employed. First, intellectual honesty involves fully engaging with scientific evidence while maintaining spiritual openness. Domain recognition means understanding the distinct purposes of scientific and spiritual inquiries. A dialogical approach creates an internal conversation between different modes of knowing. Practical integration of science and spirituality leads to a more nuanced and resilient worldview. Such integration combines scientific understanding, spiritual wisdom, and philosophical frameworks. Integrating scientific and spiritual perspectives offers several important benefits. Cognitive resilience allows you to hold complexity and ambiguity without distress. Ethical coherence aligns factual knowledge with deeper value systems. Intellectual humility recognizes the limits of both scientific and spiritual knowledge. An adaptive worldview enables revision of beliefs when new evidence emerges. Several key practices can help in navigating personal belief systems effectively. These include regular reflection on personal beliefs, engaging with challenging views, distinguishing between empirical claims and meaning making, community dialogue, and continuous learning in both domains. Remember that the journey of integrating scientific and spiritual perspectives is deeply personal and ongoing. It requires patience, openness, and self awareness. Technology's rapid advancement raises profound questions about human essence and spiritual identity. Three technologies stand at the frontier of human transformation: artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and neurotechnology. These technologies raise profound questions about what it means to be human. AI systems now mimic human thought and creativity. Genetic engineering may allow us to design future generations. Neural interfaces could merge our consciousness with machines. Adelusi cautions that these technologies potentially threaten human spiritual essence. There are concerns about loss of autonomy and free will, the diminishment of life's sacred mystery, and the commodification of human experience. Spiritual perspectives offer evaluative frameworks to assess which technologies enhance versus diminish our humanity. Technologies that expand creative potential, relieve suffering, and preserve human agency can enhance humanity. Those that reduce agency, homogenize experience, or create dependencies may diminish our essence. The path forward requires finding balance. Technological progress must be guided by wisdom that preserves the essence of what makes us human. Critical thinking can itself be a form of spiritual practice. Honest inquiry involves questioning our assumptions and seeking evidence with integrity. This process creates a bridge between scientific reasoning and spiritual wisdom. Intellectual humility means recognizing our cognitive limitations and remaining open to new understanding. This mirrors the spiritual values of humility before the unknown and openness to transcendent wisdom. The pursuit of truth involves committed exploration beyond our comfortable assumptions. Philosophy acts as a mediator, helping believers engage more deeply with both scientific and spiritual questions. Many spiritual traditions embrace critical thinking as part of their practice. These include Buddhist analytical meditation, Islamic kalam philosophical inquiry, and Jewish Talmudic questioning. As Adelusi suggests, philosophy can help believers engage more deeply with both scientific and spiritual questions. Critical thinking becomes spiritual practice when we approach both domains with openness, rigor, and a commitment to truth. Religious authority represents the power structure that defines and interprets religious doctrine and practice. It manifests in various forms, including clerics, scriptural interpretations, and institutional hierarchies. Adelusi's critique of religious authority centers on the dangers of uncritical acceptance. He questions the practice of surrendering personal judgment to external authorities. Adelusi warns against substituting personal discernment with guidance from others, no matter how learned they may appear. He advocates for a balanced approach that respects tradition while honoring personal insight. Spiritual manipulation occurs when religious authority becomes a tool for control rather than guidance. Warning signs include exploitation of spiritual vulnerability, financial or psychological control mechanisms, active discouragement of questioning, and isolation from opposing viewpoints. These tactics create dependency and prevent genuine spiritual growth. Logical analysis provides believers with tools to distinguish between authentic spiritual guidance and potential exploitation. This process involves questioning claims of exclusive access to truth, examining the internal consistency of teachings, assessing alignment with established ethical principles, and considering historical context. This analytical approach doesn't diminish faith, but rather strengthens it by removing harmful distortions. Personal discernment is essential in navigating spiritual matters. This involves balancing community wisdom with individual insight, developing informed spiritual intuition, recognizing manipulation tactics, and taking responsibility for personal beliefs. Mature faith requires this blend of respect for tradition with critical thinking. True spiritual maturity involves neither blind submission to authority nor complete rejection of tradition. but rather a thoughtful integration of wisdom sources with personal discernment and ethical reasoning. This balance honors both the value of established wisdom and the necessity of individual responsibility. Scientific reductionism refers to the approach of explaining complex phenomena by breaking them down into their simplest components. In science, reductionism attempts to understand complex systems by studying their most basic components. For example, breaking down a living organism into cells, molecules, and eventually atoms. The reductionist approach has led to remarkable scientific advances. It has helped us understand fundamental particles, identify molecular mechanisms, and has been crucial for technological and medical breakthroughs. However, reductionism has significant limitations. It often fails to account for emergent properties, characteristics that arise when components interact in a system, but aren't present in the individual parts. Complex systems like ecosystems, social structures, and consciousness cannot be fully explained by reducing them to their parts. Emergent properties occur when the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. For example, water's properties can't be predicted just from understanding hydrogen and oxygen atoms. Similarly, consciousness emerges from neural activity but cannot be reduced to individual neurons. In contrast to reductionism, holistic approaches view systems as integrated wholes. This perspective considers context, relationships, and recognizes that different levels of organization may require different explanatory frameworks. Spiritual traditions have long emphasized holistic understanding. They recognize the interconnectedness of all beings, focus on meaning and purpose beyond mechanical explanations, and value experiential knowledge and intuition as valid ways of understanding reality. A more complete understanding of reality may require balancing reductionist scientific methods with holistic perspectives. Complex phenomena like human consciousness, ecological systems, and social structures require both detailed analysis of components and an integrated contextual understanding of the whole. Though science and spirituality have often been positioned as adversaries, they share fundamental commonalities that can serve as bridges between these worldviews. Both science and spirituality are grounded in core shared values. Truth-seeking drives scientific inquiry and spiritual exploration alike. Wonder at the universe's complexity and beauty inspires both scientists and spiritual practitioners to continue their respective quests. And improving human welfare has been a central motivation in both scientific advancement and spiritual teachings throughout history. Building on these shared values, we can develop specific strategies for meaningful dialogue between scientific and spiritual perspectives. First, establishing mutual respect requires acknowledging the value of different approaches to knowledge, even when we disagree with specific claims. Second, finding common language helps bridge conceptual divides. Terms like consciousness or energy may be understood differently, but can serve as starting points for dialogue. Third, collaborative projects focusing on shared concerns like environmental preservation or ethical applications of technology can bring scientific and spiritual communities together. Science and spirituality can be viewed as complementary approaches to understanding reality, each with distinct strengths. Science excels at explaining the how of phenomena through empirical observation, measurement, and falsifiable theories. Spirituality often addresses the why questions concerning meaning, purpose, and values that shape human experience. Philosophy can help mediate between these approaches by examining assumptions, clarifying concepts, and integrating diverse perspectives. The path forward lies not in forcing agreement, but in recognizing how these different approaches can work together to enrich our understanding of ourselves and our universe. The intersection of science and spirituality is vividly seen in medicine and healing practices. Evidence-based medicine relies on rigorous clinical trials, measurable health outcomes, and standardized protocols to ensure effective treatment. Spiritual approaches recognize the mind-body connection, incorporate faith and prayer, draw from traditional healing practices, and emphasize the importance of community support. Research has demonstrated significant effects of spiritual practices on health outcomes. Studies show that meditation and prayer can reduce stress levels by up to 75%. Recovery times may improve by 40% when conventional medicine is complemented with spiritual practices. For pain management, combined approaches show a 55% improvement. Most notably, overall well-being scores improve by up to 85% when both approaches are integrated thoughtfully. Integrative healthcare approaches recognize that true healing addresses the whole person, not just physical symptoms, but mental, spiritual, and social well-being. When evidence-based medicine and spiritual approaches are integrated, patients experience improved treatment adherence and enhanced coping mechanisms. Many report reduced side effects from medical interventions, greater overall satisfaction with their care, and more sustainable long-term health outcomes. As Voltaire noted, the art of medicine consists of amusing the patient while nature cures the disease. Perhaps the wisdom in this quote lies in recognizing that healing involves multiple dimensions. Both science and spirituality contribute to the healing process, recognizing that each approach offers unique and valuable insights that, when combined thoughtfully, provide more complete care. In this case study, we examine environmental ethics as an area where scientific understanding and spiritual perspectives constructively intersect. Scientific research provides crucial data about our environmental crisis. Global temperatures have risen 1.1 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times. The World Wildlife Fund reports a 68% decline in monitored wildlife populations since 1970. According to the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, 1 million species now face extinction. The scientific conclusion is clear. We need urgent action to prevent irreversible damage to Earth's ecosystems. Spiritual traditions offer complementary ethical frameworks. Many religions emphasize human stewardship of creation. Indigenous worldviews highlight the sacred interconnection of all living beings. Most spiritual traditions recognize our ethical duty to protect the environment for future generations. From these spiritual perspectives emerges a moral imperative. We have an ethical responsibility to care for the natural world. Environmental ethics demonstrates how science and spirituality can productively integrate. Scientific knowledge provides the factual basis for understanding our impact, while spiritual values offer ethical frameworks for our response. This integration manifests in concrete initiatives. Faith-based conservation projects combine scientific data with spiritual motivation to protect ecosystems. Indigenous land management practices integrate traditional ecological knowledge with modern conservation science. And ecotheology reinterprets religious teachings in light of current environmental understanding. Environmental ethics exemplifies how science and spirituality can work together toward a common goal: protecting our shared planetary home. Balancing scientific progress with spiritual wisdom presents one of humanity's most profound challenges. Adelusi's vision centers on achieving equilibrium between rapid technological advancement and timeless wisdom traditions. In Adelusi's framework, technology must be guided by human values, drawing ethical insights from wisdom traditions and integrating these perspectives rather than separating them. Technological advancement must be guided by deeper questions about human flourishing and purpose. Questions like, what makes human life meaningful? How does technology serve humanity? And what values should guide innovation? This balanced approach is essential for navigating complex challenges like artificial intelligence development, climate change response, and bioethical dilemmas. Each requires both scientific insight and wisdom-based values. Adelusi proposes a balanced approach that first recognizes technological possibilities, then applies wisdom-based evaluation, integrates diverse perspectives through dialogue, and finally implements solutions with awareness of consequences. When we successfully balance progress and wisdom, we achieve sustainable innovation, ethical technological development, human-centered progress, and maintain cultural and spiritual vitality. Adelusi's vision ultimately offers an integrated path forward, one that honors both scientific innovation and time-tested wisdom. This balance provides humanity with the resources to navigate our most complex challenges.
In the conclusion of Adelusi's work, we arrive at a unified vision that resolves the apparent tension between science and spirituality. Adelusi concludes that both science and spirituality are valuable and necessary ways of understanding reality. Rather than being in conflict, they offer complementary perspectives that together provide a more complete picture of our existence. Philosophy and logic serve as essential bridges between these domains, allowing us to navigate between scientific inquiry and spiritual reflection. The book calls for a thoughtful integration of scientific and spiritual perspectives. Adelusi emphasizes that neither science nor spirituality alone is sufficient for understanding the fullness of human experience. To understand our existence fully and to live with meaning and purpose, we need both the precision of scientific inquiry and the depth of spiritual reflection. This integrated approach creates a more complete and humane understanding of our world and ourselves, allowing us to embrace both reason and meaning in our search for truth.